Hey, Matt.
Tyler.
Tonight we are interviewing Dr. Tudor Franco, our second repeat guest.
That's right.
He is of Stellar Success Podcast, and he is also an anesthesiologist. He interviews a lot of doctors, and we discussed very briefly, Tudor and I discussing wellness and his podcast. Since he talks to so many doctors, he considers a lot of wellness subjects. You and I kind of started as a wellness podcast.
Right.
And my mom was like, "Hey, you guys started as a wellness podcast. Why aren't you guys still doing wellness?" Well, I kind of consider we are doing wellness. Like
Oh,
we've
yeah.
we've kind of been doing career day of a lot of people, but I feel like part of wellness is finding your thing, like
Hey,
finding what's your
why don't you tell
purpose.
Nona to stay in her lane and, leave this to the professionals? And yeah, I mean, wellness does mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So yeah, I think in the background, the underlying theme in a lot of our stuff is wellness, like what motivates, what keeps you healthy, what keeps you on track.
So I think it's going to be fun for the three of us to discuss, first of all, what is wellness? What is success? Those are big topics, but I'm in a thing now that it's more than just taking some vitamins and hopping in a cold plunge. And you need to have a why. So when we've been talking to a lot of people, it's about what's the thing that gets them going. And we focus a lot of times on some of their setbacks and how they overcame them. And that's a major part of wellness.
Yeah, totally. And I think Tudor's a great person for this. Obviously, I was thinking about him today and thinking about our one we did with him probably last winter, actually, of 25. He understands his success is different than most, and he's become very successful in a lot of different areas.
He came from Romania.
Yeah.
It was a communist government, so you couldn't have any property. And he basically became a doctor in Romania out of just pure determination, and then got his training in the United States again out of pure determination, and then became an entrepreneur.
Yeah. No, so I think he's going to be a good person to talk to about this.
Good. All right, I'm excited. So here's Tudor.
I can feel it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to House Calls, the podcast. We just gave you a little intro of Tudor before he got on with us, but here we all three together, and we want to talk about wellness tonight. Tudor, you've been doing your podcast with a lot of physicians, a lot of doctors, a lot of opinions on wellness and success. And it would be interesting to see how all three of us, how our opinions have changed basically over the year and a half, or even over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on again.
Always good to see you. Always good to have you on here, Tudor, one of our early guests and a popular guest. And one of my favorite anesthesiologists.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. So it was interesting for me to be on this journey with the podcast. I'm almost 200 episodes in right now, and I've talked to many doctors from almost all specialties, and things that I thought I knew, I discovered very easily and very freshly, I would say, from them. And you're asking about wellness. This field it's an ever evolving field. I feel like in the past, I would say 5 years or so, a lot of influencers, a lot of people that have more or less anything to do with medical profession are getting into this field. And the more I talk to people on my podcast about it, the more I found out that no matter what specialty they're in, a lot of them are switching gears and they're pivoting to go into this field of wellness. It's a popular belief nowadays that many people are looking for alternative ways of increasing their health, their lifespan, their health span. And less the regular medical advice becomes useful. And I'm not talking about, voodoo stuff. The people are getting into psychic medicine or anything like that. I'm talking about real research that's out there for, new medications, new peptides, new ways of combining things to provide a certain result. And I think the ever evolving field of wellness is going to probably take off really fast. I've had people on my podcast, for example, that um, are are opening their own practices in wellness field, um, more of a coaching type of practice for people to attend to, like not life coaching, but health coaching, I would say.
So, Tudor, when you're talking about this, I think some people hear wellness and they think, "Oh, I got to eat this and eat that." But I think what you're talking to is I have a specific ailment that modern medicine isn't correcting for me, or I'm not getting the results I want. And so people are venturing out, pushing the boundaries to do research to say, "Hey, try this supplement, try this herb." Or so, is you and I on the same page when you're talking the wellness that you're seeing?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily restricted to one illness or another. It's the whole package, I would say, that people want to live more and want to live better more.
Right.
And that,
How do you define how like I think it'd be interesting to hear how we each define wellness. So if I was going to define wellness, I kind of think of strong mind, strong body, strong spirit. And I actually think I was taught that even where I went to school growing up. It was kind of like the idea of the student athlete, like strong mind, strong body. Uh, and I think some people misinterpret it as trying to live forever. And you
yeah,
mentioned lifespan versus health span. I think really people who are into wellness realize that you can't guarantee that. Any of us could be black swans where we appear perfectly healthy and then we get sick or we get in an accident. So it's more about just while you're alive, having as much energy and as positivity to your health as you can. Do you
right.
guys have different perspectives?
Wow,
Yeah,
Ty asked us a question. Let's jump on this. This is big.
yeah, I think that's a great point you made, Ty, because um, it all comes from the mind, right? But also comes from the um, notion that our body uh, getting older, um, you have a decrease in hormonal levels, you have a decrease in mental acuity, you have all kinds of issues that are happening to you as because of aging. And that's where the people are starting to look into how can I avoid or prevent this kind of like slumps. Um, and I think probably one of the main sources of increasing the health span is how do you compensate for those deficiencies. I'm talking about supplements, about you know any kind of elemental deficiencies, magnesium, calcium, whatever else, right? Supplements about hormonal levels that need to be increased to a normal um, level to function well. And also from the mental point of view, people forget that you need to train that organ, your brain, the same way you train your muscles. And most of the time people don't take that in very seriously. Like the decrease in mental acuity is staggering in people our age, I would say, or older than us. And it's nothing that we can prevent. It's nothing that we can predict. We just need to do the work. You need
Right.
to train your brain in a certain way to train your memory, to train your ideas, to train the way you think, the way you solve issues and problems. Like that, those things are like they need to be done on a day-to-day basis.
But, yeah, I think wellness is, everyone's is different. right? I like hot yoga. Ty likes to get on the bike and ride. I know you do all sorts of different dancing and all sorts of different
Right.
things. And there's no right or wrong, right? It's what makes me feel good. If I'm confident in how I'm feeling and the actions that I'm doing, then that's my wellness, right? That I know that I need to get up. I mean, I want to get up and I want to do this. And it's not for any other reason that it just gives me a clear head and clear mind. And I feel like I'm in better shape. I don't want to live forever, ever, because I know death is undefeated. But I just want to be ready. And for me, being ready is just exercising, getting outside, being around people, and those kinds of things to
Yeah.
keep everything in order.
Yeah. I think one of the things that people need to realize is that when you talk about wellness, um, y- and I'm thinking now about the blue zone concept, right? Um,
Which is what?
which is the concept of having areas on planet Earth that are completely skewed statistically in terms of lifespan and health span of that population, which means that there is something in the environment over those areas that is different that people are doing also, like the way they feed themselves, the way they socialize themselves, the way they understand to, uh, you know, um, communicate with themselves, create that sense of community much stronger that we're used to, maybe even here in the United States. We don't have a blue zone in the United States.
I think
That's
we have
an
one
issue.
yeah, don't
Hmm.
we have one in Southern California, maybe? But it's based on the book by Dan Buettner, I think his name is.
Right.
And one of
Yeah,
the things with movement is people are always moving. Like they're walking places, they're working in their gardens. But
exactly.
the food can really vary. Sometimes it's very vegetarian, sometimes very Mediterranean. I think
Yeah,
there might be even some zones where it's heavy in fat.
right.
Um, and the big thing is the sense of community
Exactly.
that people have, and that's super
Exactly.
important. And I think sometimes older people in the United States and probably other countries get isolated. It's important, especially as you get older, to keep your friendships, join your book club,
Yep.
go out at night, join Dr. Klepper's trivia team, all those things.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And those things are, they're easy to do, but they're often, you know, forgotten in our
Absolutely.
lives, right?
hmm
So
yeah,
you tend to go when you retire, right? For example, people tend to go away and isolate themselves more. Like, I want to get a house in the woods. I want to get a house on the beach. I want to get let's build a villa in the forest or something like that. But they don't realize that you need community, you need connection, you need to belong to something uh, in the environment. So I think that's the blue zone difference, basically, where people are living, close to 100 years old, and they're trying to figure out what's different in those zones. And I've talked to a couple of guests on my podcast, and it was a very interesting conversation. For example, that um, they, like you said, they don't necessarily think that it's food related. The most important factor was the fact that they spend more time outside with other people around them and with family also around them, like with the extended family around them. And that made a difference. Like, you know, you don't have phones, you don't have iPads, you don't have TVs. You just spend the time playing cards or playing backgammon or chess with your uncle or with your great grandfather. And that created that kind of community's, sense of belonging to something. Um, and then there's another, aspect of people talking about wellness where, as I said, you need to the extreme example would be Brian Johnson, right? Who's taking I don't know how many pills a day to
yeah,
make
yeah,
himself live longer
right.
or be younger or whatever it is, which is the extreme example. But also, you need to understand that compensating for some deficiency while you're getting older is necessary for you to have a better health span.
I was kind of thinking about that today with when you're young, your body's good, and actually your soul's good. You're out playing, you're with your friends all the time, and your mind is zero.
Yeah,
Max was less than zero.
100%.
But as you reach your young adulthood, your mind's building, you're gaining a lot with your mind, your body's still going strong, and maybe your spirit and your soul isn't quite as strong. And then as you get older, you do have to compensate for your body some, but you want to keep your mind going as long as possible. And then as they both go, you're hoping that you're filling that with your soul and your spirit and everything. And
yeah,
it's kind of like those stages of life. You cannot be hitting, 1,000 in each category the whole time. And I think some people, when they hear about wellness, they do think about the different, I got to listen to a health podcast every single day. And of course, I'm going to believe everything that person said because I just heard it. And I have to wake up. I have to get my sun. I have to do my grounding. I have to do my cold plunge. I have to do my sauna. I have to do my workout. I have to write in my journal. And sometimes I hear that and I'm like, that's a lot. Like, that's even stressful
yeah,
doing all that. And you're like, okay, well, maybe just try to tone down the stress a little bit and stick with the basics. Like, so if you're
right.
starting off, you're like, what's wellness? Well, first of all, wellness is trying to get a good night's sleep. Like, that's probably the
Yeah,
very number one thing. And if you don't know how to do
yes,
that or you struggle with that, then there's great podcasts you listen to, but you're not going to do the 12 checkpoint thing. You're just going to be like, okay, I'll go to bed at the same time every night.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And that,
you gotta pick and choose, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
Because, everything in moderation, even moderation, right?
right.
Because if there's something going on and you need to amp up one of the pillars that we've been talking about, that makes sense because there's other factors. Your wellness is all about yourself, but there's so many outside factors that can affect it. You gotta have to be flexible and nimble enough to kind of roll with the punches a bit.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. I think sleeping habits is something that I I've noticed a lot in my interviews, for example, with people that are either trying to quantify sleep or follow the sleep patterns or track the sleep and get any kind of statistical data from that, from those wearable things that we have to track the sleep. But one thing that I notice is that all of them are saying, look, it's very important to keep a routine on your sleep, to go to sleep to a certain time, wake up at a certain time. And if you can avoid eating, a few hours before you go to sleep, don't drink alcohol before going to sleep and all this stuff. Another big issue that I think I found out from my interviews is the fact that people start losing it when they retire. And that's because a lot of us don't have hobbies or don't have a sense of purpose after they get out of their main profession or main job. And that's a thing that we need to think and plan well before we get to that point. Because you retire, you're used to go to that place of work every day, 8 hours a day, and all of a sudden you're not. And what do you do with your time? And you need to think about, what am I doing with my life at that point? Because the sense of purpose needs to be there for another 20, 30 years until you end of your life. So you need to find things that give you pleasure of doing them. Either is gardening, either is like, volunteering in a community activity, do something. Most people understand retirement as something that, oh, I'm just going to go to the beach and sit there for hours and watch TV and play video games and don't bother me. I just want to sleep the whole day. Okay, you can do that for a month or two or three, but you're not going to do that for 30 years. So you need to find something to give you pleasure, to keep you active mentally, first of all, and then physically, the second of all. So I strongly got into conversations like this with people that are very motivated to get, especially medical professionals, because that's what I'm focusing on my podcast, is to get those people that are doctors and nurses and all this medical jobs that we have, to focus on things that are totally medically unrelated with their lives, and get themselves in something that they have find pleasure with to do, right? Because it's going to come a time when you're not going to do this medical stuff any longer. And you need to find things that you want to enjoy outside of your profession.
We keep talking about sense of community, and
Yeah,
I've brought it up in the past, but there's studies show that people that own dogs are happier and more filled because there's a community, not the community of walking your dog in the neighborhood. Doesn't mean you know everybody in the neighborhood, doesn't mean you're stopping and having a cocktail with everybody, but there's a community of, hey, how you doing? Like, I know your dog. And it's just that little stuff. And obviously the
yeah,
dog gives you unconditional love and things like that. It's those little things that mean a lot that I don't think people really fully grasp,
yeah,
that can be game changers.
I think we're kind of maybe one of the first generations to openly discuss retirement, especially. I think every businessman, doctors, lawyers, whatever it is, I think that previous generations were basically like, I'm going to play golf every day and I'm going to relax. And then you can't do that. Like your shoulder gets sore, your back gets sore, and then what do you do? And I think our
exactly.
generation is really starting to think, okay, what do I want to do when I get to be that age? And I think it kind of starts with the discussion of work life balance when you're younger. So, like, well, first of all, work-life balance doesn't mean to be you hate your work and you love your leisure. You know, you can like them both, and you don't want to work too much because you need to be able to pay attention to your leisure and your family and everything like that. But how the leisure activities you start doing in middle age, start thinking, am I going to be able to do this when I'm 70? Am I going to be able to do this when I'm 80? If all your leisure activities are things that really 30-year-olds should be doing, and you're just trying to hold on like a professional athlete in the last couple of years of their career, you need to start thinking about some new leisure activities.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And it's a matter of survival, right? Because you either grow or you die. So you either do something or you're not going to do anything. And that's very detrimental to your health
I think that's
at some
everything.
point.
Either you grow or you die, right?
Yeah,
You obviously don't know my parents, but when they finally retired, they've moved. My dad's a big golfer, but they started doing other stuff, right? Nature, natural. So my mom got into art and making jewelry, and it was just, for no other reason, it's because they're looking for something more to do, and it's just extended everything. It's been fascinating. Ty, question?
So, no, I tried something today that, Matt, don't fall out of your seat. I listened to Sebastian Bach.
very
I've
nice.
never done that before. I was like,
Yes.
I was reading a book and they were like, he's the greatest composer ever. And I said, all right, Spotify, hit play. It was
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Wow,
Yeah.
wow! I'm proud of you. Proud
Yeah.
of you.
Yeah. And
yeah,
on the same note, like my wife is learning Spanish. I mean, she knew Spanish in high school
Yeah,
and a little bit
anything
here
like
and
that.
there, but she's now doing a Spanish class. Same thing. You got to keep your mind going.
Yep.
yeah, absolutely. And look, we all have the same time. We all
Mhm.
are given 24 hours in a day. There's no excuse for any of us to not to try something, because we do have time. And if you look back, you would say, oh my God, I wish I could have done this like years ago. Because you have to start somewhere. And if you look now, you have 20, 30 years, at least ahead of you, right? People start companies when they're 60s. People are
Yep.
successful all of a sudden at 60, 65. There's no time lost. There's no, you can do this thing even in the second part of your life. People have this notion that, oh my God, if I didn't do this, for like my first 40, 50 years, I'm done. I'm just going to rot on a couch for the rest of my life. And that's it. That's wrong.
Yeah. The other thing with the wellness can kind of sometimes be a little bit of a minefield, like deciding what's for you and what's not for you. And that's why I really do like the idea of coaching is, you want to start with the basics. And Matt and I talk a lot about like just going for a walk. You don't have to do CrossFit, trying to clean up your diet, trying to clean up your sleep. But one thing that Matt taught me about, and this is from kind of the addiction world, is pink clouds, where you stop drinking or stop doing drugs and you think life is solved. And I do see that some in the wellness community where it's like, okay, now that I'm doing P90X, all my problems are going to go away. And it's kind of like that I think people can get on the wellness treadmill where they do one thing, they burn out. What's the next thing? What's the next thing I can do? What's the next thing I can do?
Yeah.
And instead of just kind of getting comfortable with it and knowing what your basics are and what's the things you're experimenting with for fun, and
Yes.
sometimes you'll hear something, you'll be like, this thing is inherently true. Like, say, like cold plunging. If you're super
Right.
sore, athletes for decades have been hopping in a cold tub. If you're using cold plunge as a recovery tool and it's your thing, that's inherently true. Other things you're like, okay, I might try it for fun, but let's see. And one of the big things is that you mentioned was wearables, is like sometimes wearables are great for a couple weeks, but then you can get addicted to the data. Whereas when
Yeah.
I use a wearable, I'm really just doing it to be like, how long is this walk? How long did this run take me? And then I'll put it away for a couple weeks and then I'll bring it out later to see maybe did I improve or did I not improve? But I just am very aware of just don't jump on every single trend. Figure out what you truly believe in and what you have time for in your life and what you think you're gonna enjoy. But you don't have to stick with it forever. You can move on to the next one if it's not your thing.
And I think that's the problem with today with social media and influencers. Every day, new trend, and there's people that hop from one to the other, and they keep going without doing the research, saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, I should try this." If all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, I don't really get sore after I work out, but maybe I should get a cold plunge." I'm like, well, you probably don't need it because Joe Rogan does it. Doesn't mean you have to do it. And I
Right.
think people really need to understand that.
Yeah, definitely. And I talk to people, for example, that they are, they're doing, for example, they're doing their lab work every 3 months on a clockwork. And they're checking, each and every level of their electrolytes, their hormone levels, their all this stuff, right? And they want to be perfect. They want to be all in the normal limits and don't let anything like get out of hand at any point, which is okay. I mean, I certainly recommend people get the baseline, data to have and work on. God forbid you have something abnormal and you don't know about. But like you said, getting your head into this kind of numbers and guiding your life only by numbers, it's a very easy way to go nuts and don't have any kind of pleasure in life, right? And you can't do that because you not you you know at some point we're all gonna die, and we're all gonna die of something. And statistically, people die of three, four, five things. Most of us, which we can't avoid. So the conclusion is you need to keep your things in normal limits, but don't be, like you said, Ty, obsessed about certain values, either your hormonal levels or your electrolytes or your CBC or whatever you think, PSA and all this stuff, because it's a human organism. You're going to adapt to your age. Some people are going through age, different than the others. And it, like you said, it's a habit forming at the end of the day. What works for each of us? I'm
Right. Like
sure the way I eat in the morning is not good for any of you. too,
Right.
or vice versa.
But I also think, Tudor, you and I, I think we're comfortable in our manhood. So you and I, unlike Ty pops Rogaine all day, right, to keep his hair going. But you and I are like, hey, that's not important to us. Ty is very vain like that. But,
Yeah,
and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just
yeah,
saying it is what it is. But you just have to be more flexible with it.
Well,
yeah,
we do need to
absolutely.
clarify, Matt, because Rogaine's now going to reach out and try to sponsor us that I don't use their product. I would not feel comfortable sponsoring. And
Yeah,
Well, obviously, neither do I.
the only person that knows how bald I am is Tudor because he's taller than me. Nobody else can tell.
yeah. But the thing is that we all wear caps at the OR, so that's
Yeah.
you know,
The thing I was going to say is I also think that modern Western medicine and kind of wellness, they do not need to be opposed. And I think sometimes the influencers try to make them like they're these opposite teams, and there's no reason why they can't work together. So, although I firmly believe that exercise is the best antidepressant and getting good sleep is the best antidepressant, that doesn't mean that somebody who is going through some severe depression doesn't need to see somebody for it. Or I like to say that the reason that high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart disease run in your family is because nobody runs in your family. Well, that's a nice, catchy phrase, and I hope it gets you to run. But you do need to get your diabetes treated or your different things treated
yeah,
while you are trying to improve your lifestyle. And that's where I think a lot of the influencers are trying to get you to stay away from your doctor. But you're going to
yeah,
the hospital if you have a problem. You're not gonna be, listening to your podcast and trying to figure out how you're gonna treat this. Even though food is your medicine, you might still need medicine.
yeah. No, definitely. That's not even a question. Like, there's certain disease processes and things that you need to treat with medical, you know, drugs or doctors or hospitals or whatever surgeries and so on. The question is, should we all get a GLP-1 injection because we need to lose 5 pounds, or we need to get our A1C from 5.8 to 5.6?
Yeah.
And that's where we got to this point right now. Because if people see that they're getting from a 34 waist to a 36 waist, they're not thinking about exercising. They're not thinking about eating less or sleeping more or moving more. They're thinking, oh, maybe 5 or 10 units of GLP or semaglutide will help me get this over in a month. I don't even have to do anything. So that's where the problem is, because all this social media influencing and the news and Dr. Google gets us to a point that we don't even think what we actually need to do. If there is a pill, an injection, or a supplement, that's the first choice for most of the people. And
Yeah.
that's what I think that's wrong.
And that's a trend that, because of what we do, and Matt, you're probably not aware of this, but weight really determines a lot of people if they're eligible for elective surgery. And you would think that that's not that common of a discussion in the office. It is every single day where somebody is too heavy to have the surgery that they want to have. And so there's a tendency to say, hey, even maybe somebody has mild arthritis and you're like, hey, that weight is not going to be good for you as you age. This is a conversation you need to have with your doctor. So these are conversations that I discuss with people's weight with them all the time, way more than I ever thought I would when I was in medical school. And the thing I'm noticing about the GLP-1s is people are being put on them with no education. So from an orthopedic standpoint, those medicines can affect your muscles. You lose muscle mass with those medicines. So you should be on a weightlifting program. So when I see GLP-1, I say, "Are you lifting weights?" And the number of people who say that I'm the only person that have ever mentioned to them that they should be lifting weights is almost 95%. Like it is
Wow.
insane. And then the other thing I'm seeing is that GLP-1 has shown benefits of quieting the food noise, so you're not craving food all the time, but the food is slower going through your stomach. So just imagine if you are having chicken and salad, that going slowly through your stomach versus you're proud of yourself, you've been doing it for 2 weeks, you've lost 15 pounds. Oh, I'm going to treat myself and go to Taco Bell. And that Taco Bell is going slowly through your stomach. You might think, oh, I have a side effect because I'm super, super sick tonight and in a lot of pain. You're like, that's not a side effect. That's because nobody coached you on how
Yeah.
to use the medicine properly. So, my concern, and I'm hoping we can correct this with coaching, is my concern is people who have eaten relatively healthy, already have an exercise program, when they get on a GLP-1 because they want to lose 30 to 40 pounds, those people are doing phenomenal. The people we need to lose 100 pounds are not doing well at all because they haven't fallen into those habits. The people who already have those habits, they kind of lucked into the habits, but I feel like that's a coachable thing. And that is the hot thing in medicine right now is the GLP-1s. People need coaching because
Yeah.
they're not learning, and not everybody who's put on it has listened to 10 podcasts about it to research it, like Matt
Is it
has.
yes, but well, isn't it first off, I will say that I am far from perfect, and if I could just take a pill, one pill, I'm not a big fan of food, and I don't have food anything, but if I could just take a pill once a day, it took care of everything, I'd be so happy for just food. I like sitting around, I like talking to people, but uh, I could eat the same thing every day. It doesn't really matter. But my question though is with the
Matt, if
yep.
when Mary Kate gets married someday off in the future, can I not pay for your meal at the
Oh yeah,
wedding and just have
dude.
an
I don't
empty thing
drink, I
there?
don't eat. I'm a cheap date. I am a
Okay.
cheap date and a great dancer. So yeah, you
Yeah.
want me there. Um, and best of luck to you, MK. Thoughts and prayers. But I also want to know: is it true though, with when you lose weight, you lose muscle before you lose fat? Is that correct?
Well, I mean, it depends on when, how much fat you have to lose. And, people that have to lose a lot of fat, they usually have a lot of fat compared to muscle.
Okay,
But after they lose the fat that, most of the fat that they need to lose, they lose muscle the same way they lose fat. And you end up with this like body image, I would say, that's, emaciated, I would say.
sure.
um, because they don't work out, like Ty said. They're not coached, they're not educated. They just think that everything goes very easy to take a pill and that's it. They don't have to do anything.
Why aren't
Um,
doctors who are prescribing these things? Why don't they coach more? Is it not enough time? I mean, they have to move
well,
on,
I don't
or
know, Ty. How many minutes do you spend with the patient? Seven,
Uh, Y y
7 minutes?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
well,
right.
but it's funny, I mean, we schedule 15-minute slots, and somebody might be 2 minutes because they might be like, "Alright, I need my shot again," and you're like, "Oh, okay," and then we chit chat, and then other people might be 20 minutes, but I'm still surprised that people are putting people on the shots without teaching them, and, that still surprises me, but, um, when the one thing I mentioned with any weight loss, whether it's from the GLP-1s or through diet and exercise, however you do it, I think one of the big things is the pink clouds that I mentioned before is that when you first start losing weight, you feel better, you feel more energetic. People around you are probably starting to be like, "Hey, you look good." You get the dress, you go to the wedding, you get the suit, you go to the wedding, everybody's like, "Man, you look phenomenal. What are you doing?" There is an energy there, but you have to sit with it the rest of your life. Like, so once you start eating healthy, you have to find the motivation to continue doing it besides people praising you, because believe me, after a couple years of eating that way, you always feel good. It's your norm. So you're not eating to feel good. You're not eating to get the compliments. You're not eating for the dress. So you have to be eating for yourself. You have to be like, what gives me energy that day? What settles my stomach that day? What works for me? And that same thing with exercise. Like how many people they exercise, they do the big run, they feel phenomenal. Everybody congratulates them, but then they don't go out for the walk the next day because the pink clouds are over.
But don't
Yeah.
you think, Ty, that what you just said, that's wellness, right? It's
Yeah.
selfish. Wellness is selfish, right? It's what I have to do for me to make me feel better, be better to the people around me. So if it's like, hey, yeah, I get that high from going on the big run, and people are saying that's great, but you got to make it part of your life because you're doing it for yourself, not for the compliment, not for the pat on the back.
I
Yeah,
think
I would argue on something here that people understand wellness as comfort and don't realize that to be better and well, you need to be a little bit out of your comfort zone to do that, to achieve that. And that's what they don't like. And nobody
Sure.
Mhm.
likes. I mean, um, everything that we accomplish in life, right? It took a little bit of discomfort in the beginning. Either you had to go through medical school or you had to go to residency and internship, and starting with like harder things like, you know, when I started diving, I was totally out of my comfort zone. But it became a pleasurable thing. It's something that I enjoy right now to do. It's the same thing with wellness, right? You get to form a habit while you're breaking the old ones. And that's very uncomfortable. Like I need to eat a certain way. I need to wake up a certain way. I need to, exercise a certain way. That's not pleasurable. But once I form that habit, I'm well.
Yeah. And, Tudor, I used to say this when I used to speak at a lot of AA meetings. I used to say, no one found God on prom night, right? It's, because you gotta go through the stuff to get on the other side. And that's when the
Yeah.
learning happens. That's when the good stuff happens, when you get through the tough part. So yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And I think that's how some of the influences are. Like Matt, you would say in the AA world is somebody who's been sober for 3 months probably should not be getting out too much on the speaking tour and the mentoring tour. And I think with anything in wellness, whether it's diet, nutrition, whatever it is, one of the things that gives you energy is to talk about it and start preaching it to other people. And I think sometimes the influencers, they quit their job, like they quit their job and they start they put out their diet book and they put out their diet podcast, but there's only so much you can say about eating healthy. And then all of a sudden you're selling the t-shirts and then you're selling the cookbooks and then, you're having people sign up for your newsletter. And you can only say, hey, eat good food so many times that you do have to be a little bit careful about that. And I
Sure.
find that some of the influencers that I used to follow, I don't follow because now they have to put out something once or twice a week. And now I will just use them more as a reference to be like, oh, this person probably has something about sleep. And it's usually because somebody asks me a question. I'll look up what they've done on sleep recently. I'll listen to the podcast and be like, hey, I think this one's pretty good, or on strength training or whatever it may be. But I'm always cautious of to be the person who that's now who they are.
Yeah.
They can't move from that because now they are the carnivore person and they have a whole carnivore line of meat sticks and they can't back off from that. So, not saying that carnivore is not good for some people. It's just, I've noticed that in the health world.
Totally. Yep. I think that's fair.
Yeah. Trends are trends. Like, that's why they're trends, because they come and go, right? So, I mean, I've tried paleo, I've tried keto, I've tried carnivore. Um, I still think I eat the way I like to eat. And we all have foods that we like to eat, right? Most of the time. And you kind of build your, you know, food regimen on around the things that you like to eat, because otherwise it's like it's terrible. It's
Yeah.
gross, right?
Mm,
I mean, not too many people like to eat sardines,
yeah.
but
That's
most of the influencers say, "Oh, you should eat. Why don't you eat like 5 cans of sardines a day? You know, that would be amazing for you. That will save you years of life." Who likes to do that? Nobody, right?
nobody.
So
Nobody.
it's like the same
But
thing with, things that, for example, I was talking to a couple of people about the fact that, and I didn't realize this, there's such a big discrepancy between how wellness is treated for men compared to women
Hmm.
in the second part of their lives, right? So it's very hard to find companies or doctors that are treating women for wellness because it's a complicated thing. It's a complicated realm to get into. Women have different levels of hormones all throughout, the body. They're fluctuating a lot compared to men. Most people don't want to attend to those things, and they honestly probably don't know how to, compared to men, where it's pretty easy. Like we don't have much to correct other than testosterone level and maybe some other a couple of things that we need to look at, but it's easy to fix and we don't suffer much um, throughout our lives because of that. And there's some people that are saying, well, this is probably another trend in the wellness industry, is the fact that we need to attend to women health much more than we look at men,
huh.
because
Interesting.
it's a much more complicated thing that we need to get into.
But would you say women tend to be more the users of wellness, like the users of the supplements and the trends and the media and all those things?
Yeah, I think, and
Yeah.
I think it's easier for them to get into this stuff, into this trend, so to speak, because um, they're, you know, the fact that people think, oh, I reach menopause and from now on things are going to be totally different for me from the biological point of view, and they kind of accept that in a way or another, but nobody's addressing those issues on a very serious level with women. Like, what does menopause mean for women? Like, from the hormonal level, and what, from the bone density level, from the mental acuity level, that there's so many different things that you need to look at. And all these clinics that, they're doing wellness treatments are skeptical in a way to attend to women at that level compared to men.
Yeah. The thing
Interesting.
about some of the trends is you can try them and learn and use it as a tool. So like you mentioned that you tried paleo, and it's like I tried paleo. I pretty much eat paleo now because it's basically meat, fruits, vegetables,
Yeah,
nuts. And it's just that now, like I tend to eat sourdough bread. And I realize that really bread and pasta and a bagel and a donut and a cookie and a cake are kind of all the same thing once they hit my digestive system. So it's like that knowledge of when I went hardcore paleo still sticks with me a little bit. I went
yeah,
vegetarian once and it wasn't for me, but it did widen the number of vegetables I'm willing to eat. Like I used to be a pickier eater, that forced me to be less picky. And the biggest one was intermittent fasting. Like, so sometimes I tend to not eat breakfast anyway. So I'm technically still intermittently fasting, but I would do 24-hour fasts. And like a perfect
mhm,
example was last week, I didn't have breakfast. I was in the office. I had a meeting at noon that went till 2. I went to the dentist. He numbed my mouth up. I didn't eat till 6. when I was 17 years old, I would have been like dying. And at this age, I was like, it's not that big of a deal. It was 24 hours without eating. And
Yeah.
it was fine. And I'm not like, if one of my kids was doing that, they'd be like, I'm so hangry. I'm so hangry, But now
Yeah.
whenever I get in a bad mood in the morning, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm hangry. I'm just not the hungry part. I'm just the angry part.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't think you so the fun I guess what I'm saying is I'm kinda like bad mouthing some of the trends, but at the same time, I think they're fun and you don't necessarily have to carry it out the rest of your life. You can take
No.
that little tidbit that is helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, everybody, their each stage of life probably has a certain need, right? Like you said, when you're 17, 20 years old, you don't need to be like strict on your diet, but maybe you need to exercise more. Maybe you need to get into like, more community stuff. When you go over in the 30s, 40s, you start thinking about other things like how much do I eat? How much do I drink? My sleep is not that good anymore. So, you're going through 50s and 60s and you notice that, oh my God, you know, like you said, my arthritis is starting to show, and I don't sleep very well. I can't take alcohol anymore very well, and my my hormones are not the same. So at some point, every stage in life has a need, right? And I think that's where wellness industry needs to address each one of those stages. And I think they're great results. I think you in the second part of your life, you'd certainly need to look into optimizing what you can without huge side effects. And if you can do that, I think the health span would be pretty good. The lifespan, I don't think we have much control about.
Yeah.
you know,
Do you have any of your guests that maybe are a little bit older than you that really stand out that you were like, that's a great role model, that's somebody I need to really keep them in mind?
yes, I had a couple of them, and am very grateful they came on my podcast and they had a lot of wise thing to say. And one of the things that they said is that the one that I mentioned, the fact that they always had a purpose
Hmm.
in life, no matter what they did. Um, Either in their profession, when they retired, they picked up something else. They pivot into a different industry, or they had a great hobby to play with. Um, but their mind was active all the time. And I think that's one of the first thing I look at. The second thing I look at is, like you said, community, environment, your social environment. Where do you spend your time with? Who do you spend your time with? The people that are around you can make you or break you. They can lift you up or they can pull you down. So that classical thing of five people around you, it's very true. And people need to look very carefully of who they belong to. Like if you want to go into a community like, I don't know, a mastermind or a club or any kind of association that has a purpose, and you brainstorm with those people around you regarding that specific idea, that's going to help you immensely, not from the social point of view, but also from your mindset point of view, to keep you active mentally. So those two things, I think, I notice from guests that are very sharp in their later stage of life.
Good stuff.
We started our podcast. I think our first couple guests were purely just wellness and health, and
Yep.
we have been in a trend recently where we've been talking about to people about their life journeys, which is a lot about their hobbies, and their careers and how they got to that career. And the perception is, hey, you're not talking about wellness anymore. But in my mind, that purpose is maybe the biggest key part of wellness. And these people have inspiring lives. And I think for our younger listeners, it's cool to hear the journey. that they did not show up at age 17 put together. Like they had trials and tribulations to get to that point. So even though like behind the scenes, it's like, oh, we're not talking about wellness. I think we are talking about wellness
Absolutely.
and we're taking little tidbits from each person, but also for Matt and I, we're kind of building community. Like we're meeting new people,
Yep.
making connections by interviewing these people.
And this is
Absolutely.
also a little bit of there's also a creative part, right? That kind of really keeps the mind going. So no, Ty, you and I are in great shape. We're gonna be fine
Yeah.
forever.
So my last question for Tudor is, what really surprised you about the challenges of podcasting as we talk about the creative part and trying to be better at it? Is it a little bit of a you against you trying to get better at podcasting?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's one thing that I noticed. And I grew a lot with this podcast that I have, right? And I'm sure you guys probably experience the same thing. Because the more you talk to people, the more they stimulate your thinking and they bring you more ideas to ask about, and you kind of diverge your conversation into things that you never thought initially. So I used to, and you can see this. I mean, I'm sure people are going to go back and listen to my podcast in the beginning, and I was very nervous. I was very hectic in the way I, presented the questions, and then I let loose. Slowly, I let loose, and the more loose I was, the better interview I got, because I was going with the guest. I didn't make the guest go with me. And I
Uh-huh.
think that's a trick for many podcasters to learn. You need to listen.
Absolutely.
You don't need to
Hmm.
ask questions all the time.
Hmm.
The more you let the guest talk, the better.
How about the co-host? How would you let the co-host talk? That's also pretty
Were
good
you guys
also.
talking offline about me before this happened?
No,
I mean, what
no,
are
there's a
we doing
website
here?
called Podcasting 101, but what you're saying is so true. We've talked to so many different people that we've known, but you forget their story because you
Yeah,
just take it for granted. And whether it's Rusty Gardner or Mr. Ritchie, or like you said, you start learning about people. I learned, and then I also find myself being much more open to talking to people. Like
yeah,
now when I have conversations, I'm allowed to ask questions, so it definitely permeates throughout your whole life, I think.
yeah. No,
And Ty
definitely. And
talks too
I, I,
much is bottom line.
I had great interviews with people that I was very nervous about. Um, and you meet someone on a podcast that day, for example, right? You don't know anything about that person except maybe some professional uh, things that he did and stuff like that. But once you start talking to people, you realize that everybody's human and everybody has soft spots and they're not perfect. And they went through hell sometimes to get where they are.
So
And
true.
that's what you need to get out of your interview. The fact that, especially on my podcast, with kind of gears towards how people get successful, right, in this profession, is the fact that one of the questions I ask a lot is, what would you have done if you know where you are right now? Would you done anything differently in your life? And 80 to 90% of the questions are answered no, because everybody needs that hardship in their lives to
Absolutely.
get successful. You cannot get to a higher point in your life without being hard.
Yeah. Everyone's got a story, and that's really what I enjoy. And as you said, I think Ty and I have definitely come into interviews going, okay, here's what we're going to talk about with this person. And it goes in a totally different way. And they're the best ones because it's just kind of a little bit more free form and you're not trying to guide it anywhere or steer it. It's just kind of let it happen. So it's
Yeah.
that you and I are agree on that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you guys. You guys are doing a great job with this. And I think I remember talking to you, Ty, years ago, right, about how we're going to do this podcast. And I remember you were very excited. And when I said something about, oh, I'm going to have my own podcast, and you were like, oh, you have a podcast already? I said,
Well,
no, not yet.
You're a mentor.
That kind of inspired me. That kind of inspired me to get going and just be like, well, we're not going to be perfect, but let's get it out there. And
Exactly.
it's funny. I was just telling Matt before this off camera. I'm like, I think the hardest ones for me are the ones where it's just me and Matt, because sometimes I feel like I don't land the plane, or we didn't make the point that I was hoping to make. And like, how do we manipulate that? I'm like, we just learn as we're going.
Yeah. Definitely.
That's just where we are.
Yeah,
Tudor,
and like you said, you created a community around you guys.
Yeah,
that's a big thing.
Yeah. So Matt, it's time for your bedtime.
It is. 80. Oh my God, 8:01. I will turn into a pumpkin. Good stuff, Tudor, as always.
Thank you, guys. I
All right,
appreciate
see ya.
this. See ya.
Good night.
Bye.
All right.